This is Twit.
As we reported on yesterday's show, Google's vice president for social, Vik Gundotra, is leaving the company. The departure of Gundotra raises serious questions about the future of Google+, that company's social network. With us to sort all this out is Rolf Winkler, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome, Rolf.
How you doing, Mike?
Great. And we also have Will Oremus, a senior tech writer for Slate.com. Welcome, Will.
Thanks.
Now, we'll start with you, Will, since you were just on camera most recently. What's next for Google+? I mean, this is clearly not just the departure of an executive with everything else remaining the same. Just generally speaking, before we get into the details, what do you think Google+ and Google's next move is here?
Well, this is speculation, but I don't see Google+ tomorrow being much different than Google+ was yesterday, which is to say that as a social network, it's still pretty much a ghost town. There are exceptions. You know, people use it for certain hobbies. People who don't like Facebook use it for certain things. Google employees use it. But I think Google Plus is going to continue because it has become really important to Google as a way to get people to sync their accounts across Google services, to have a real name identity across Google services, to be searchable across YouTube, and you know, it's integrated with Google Hangouts. So it has really been built into Google as a platform, as an identity service. And I don't think we're going to see that go away.
Okay. And I would take issue with the ghost town characterization. I'm one of those rabid users who's like super into it. And it just seems, to me, it's a torrent of content and communication, and I just can't keep up with it. It grew faster than Twitter or Facebook ever did at their fastest growing points. And so I tend to think that it's a very active place for a relatively small number of people, but a larger number of people than on Twitter, for example, and that a lot of that activity is private sharing, and we'll get into the private sharing issue in a second. But that is a controversial point. Now, Rolf Winkler, you follow Google and Google Plus very carefully. What's your view generally about what happened here, why Gundotra is leaving, and what is kind of, I guess, went wrong, if you will, with Google Plus at Google?
Well, one thing to note, Mike, is you mentioned activity, that it grew very quickly, and you actually have to wonder, how was that activity measured? That's something that I reported in terms of Google Plus's inability to get traction. That unit, Google Plus itself, liked to say, for instance, they announced in October 540 million monthly active users, except there were a lot of people that were very skeptical. They noted, wait a minute, am I an active user if I just click the little red notification bell in my Gmail account? If I'm, now commenting on a YouTube video, which is part of now integrated with Google Plus? Not really. And in fact, a source I spoke to said that 2 years ago, the active user count, this was when the service was getting some traction. You mentioned it was growing quickly, theoretically, but the number of people actually reading posts, not sharing posts, but reading posts on Google Plus only numbered about 7 million at that point, which is obviously a tiny number for a company with billions of users. And I think that was a good sign that, in fact, while it has helped, Google makes a good point. It has helped Google kind of connect its other services together. There are a lot of skeptics about how useful Google Plus itself as a service will be.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Google Plus was 6 months old or something like that, or 10 months old or whatever it was. And it's been growing pretty steadily, and especially internationally. I'm lucky enough to be on the suggested users list, and my circle count grows by about 2,500 people a day. So somebody's signing up for it at some point. But you make a very good point. The metrics on this is filled with BS and confusion, because Google has tried to present it as being more active than in fact it is, and they count all kinds of things as users, which creates problems on multiple fronts, one of which you didn't really mention, which is that when you talk about percentages, the active users as a percentage of the number of so-called users, it's really small. And if you average in the big numbers that Google brags about, with the active users in terms of how much time they spend per month, it's minuscule, especially compared to Facebook, where people spend hours on the site. And so, so that has been a problem for Google for sure. But I think that one of the interesting things about Google Plus is that I think everybody would agree that its most successful feature is probably Video Hangouts, the video conferencing feature, which is not measured in terms of usage, even though I know a lot of people who spend huge amounts of time on Hangouts. And there are all kinds of other things. Like, for example, Google Plus is supposed to be a social layer. So let's talk about the larger scope of Google Plus within the context of the social networking industry. Now, Facebook seemed to have a case of Google envy. Google has succeeded in mobile advertising revenue because, in part, it's got lots and lots of apps. If you are an iPhone user, chances are you use 3, 4, 5, 6 Google apps, and many of those are either harvesting personal information or they're displaying advertising, and Google is making a lot of money, and Facebook wants some of that money. And so Facebook has this sort of multiple app strategy where they're acquiring the Instagrams and the WhatsApps, and they're spinning out their own creations like Paper and Facebook Camera and Facebook Messenger and so on. And their idea is to harvest user data from lots of places and to display advertising in lots of places. And next week, of course, Wednesday, they're probably going to announce an ad network as well, another place to display advertising. So within the context of that, it seems to me, and this is just my own personal opinion, that the big change for Google isn't going to be that Google Plus is going to go away or stop growing or whatever. What's going to change is that they're going to stop these forced integrations that have been so unpopular with YouTube users and so on. Now, would you agree with that, Rolf Winkler? Is that a likely direction for Google Plus, for them to stop being so aggressive with integrations?
I think that is one thing that they're going to do. I think I'm going to disagree with you. I think Google Plus itself as a service may indeed go away. Now, you're right. Hangouts and another thing you didn't mention, Photos. That's another very popular feature. Those things are not going anywhere. Another thing, again, we mentioned the identity layer. I think that's something that Google can retain, even if Google Plus as a brand may not continue. I think those are all questions that are raised by some of the other movements we've seen recently in the Google Plus unit. For instance, the employees got moved. They had been very centrally located, and they've been moved farther away on campus. And an executive from Google had told me that, this is something that I used to fight over, is proximity to Larry Page. We wanted to be close. It's good for productivity reasons and for a slew of other reasons. Besides that, they actually recently went through a reorganization. A bunch of people left or were reassigned. These are all kind of signs that, in fact, this is not a strategic priority going forward.
Now, Will Ormus, if I can jump in here, do you agree with Rolf here that there's a good chance that Google Plus could in fact go away? And if they did go away, how would Google handle the part of the personal information harvesting that involves knowing what people's relationships are? Facebook does a pretty good job with that sort of thing. Would they have something that could replace that metric?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's worth noting that a lot of people that I know inside Google would be very happy if Google Plus went away. I mean, I think there's a substantial portion of Google employees who never thought it was a great idea from the start and really didn't like it when all the forced integration started. Certainly people who use YouTube and were angry at being pushed to use Google Plus and their real name in order to comment on YouTube videos were very unhappy about it. So there would definitely be some people cheering if Google Plus did go away. That said, this is just my intuition. I think it's unlikely. Maybe it will be rebranded. Maybe the Google Plus name will go away because it doesn't have a lot of cachet at this point. I would be really surprised if they got rid of the social networking element entirely, because there really are some very active communities on there. It's not going to be a Facebook rival, despite the metrics that look like it's bigger than Twitter. It's nowhere near Twitter in terms of engagement, as far as I can tell. And so I think it's right to say that Google Plus is no longer that Google no longer sees Google Plus as a serious rival to those social networking alternatives. That said, I mean, look how, Google Reader was pretty much of a niche product, and yet people were so furious when Google got rid of it. I think Google would be really careful before getting rid of it entirely. I think what we're going to see is, as Rolf said, and based on Rolf's reporting, it really sounds like they're de-emphasizing it as a product, as a social product. I think absolutely they will need to keep something like it, no matter what, for their identity services and for integration across platforms.
I would tend to agree with a bunch of the points that were just made, because Google Plus is so integrated right now with certain Android bits, for example, the photos, as Rolf mentioned. Maybe it goes away as a social platform, as Will was saying. But it's interesting to me how we were just talking earlier about the engagement and the numbers that maybe are BS. And it seems like that's a fundamental problem Google has across multiple products. We look at all the controversy over Android activations. What's an activation? Is it when I reset my phone? Is it when I set up a phone? Is it when I buy a phone? And that's a bigger problem that's related to this that Google has to solve. They've got to get some better metrics out there for whatever product it is they're going to be pushing.